I don't necessarily use that a whole lot. However, there are some examples in steel guitar history where the phase shifter was sort of popular. Buddy Emmons used it a lot on some records. Now, octave effects can be tricky because they don't necessarily always track with your playing very well. So I have myself a patch that I built here that I call Dobro 1. And when I switch over to that, you'll hear something that sounds sort of like this. Now I've got another patch over here that I call Shuffle. And if I'm playing a Ray Price kind of tune, and I might want a little more reverb. So that's about halfway in between the amount of reverb and delay as those other two. Now, I've got a patch that I use quite a bit because out in live gigs, I need to simulate the dobro sometimes. So I have myself a patch that I built here that I call Dobro 1. And when I switch over to that, you'll hear something that sounds sort of like this. So a lot of steel players have a match bro unit or some other sort of external effects unit that they use to accomplish this idea. And I just built myself a patch in my processor to do that. So I'm going to give you a real quick rundown on basically what's going on with that, how I created my little Dobro simulator here. I started out over here with the same reverb and delay that I used in my standard fast steel patch. And then up here, I've got effects 1 way up here in the front end of the chain. So if I click on effects 1, I'm going to see that says it's a bass wah. Well, what is a wah? Well, a wah, you may have heard of a wah-wah pedal. So that's what this is. I've got a wah-wah pedal effect turned on here. And then I've got a selection. There's different types. They got crybaby and vox pedals and light pedals. Well, I like the way this fat one sounded. So all I've really done to create this fake dobro patch is I've gone down here and where it says pedal position, I've turned that to where it sounded somewhat like the dobro. So if I turn this off and play something, well, that definitely doesn't sound like the dobro. In fact, it doesn't really sound like the steel, but I'll tell you why that's true in a minute. If I turn this back on, so there was something else over there going on that didn't sound so much like it might have been the steel. So let's see what that is. Over here in Effects 2, we click on that. Let's see what that is. And you'll see in Effects 2, I've selected the Acoustic Guitar Simulator. So since we're trying to simulate an acoustic instrument with the dobro patch, and we want to have it sound, maybe if we can get it to a little bit like a resonator, I've gone in here and I've picked out Acoustic Guitar Simulator, and I've dialed up the places within that I thought kind of gave it some somewhat realistic acoustic ideas. So if I play with that and then turn it off, you'll hear the difference. So that's just the wah-wah pedal part. If I turn them both off, here you go. This is basically just my regular old fast steel patch. Except when I turn on those two things in combination with each other, now all of a sudden, it's my passable enough fake dobro. Now, I did a video series early on called Organized Pedal Steel. And this is the patch that I was using in my GT001 in that video series. And I have it named Fast Les over here. That stands for Leslie. So what we have going on in this patch over here is basically we have the same thing that we would have going on in my regular old steel guitar patch, Fast. Except we've added over here in Mod 2 a Rotary speaker simulator. And this is the thing that's going to make it sound like the organ, okay? So this simulates the Leslie speaker that Hammond organ players use. And so, again, you can see we've selected Rotary. Now, organ players have the luxury of, while they're playing, since they can use their feet, they can actually control the speed of the Leslie as they go, and there's a lot of cool things that can be done with that. We don't necessarily have the option of doing that, so I always leave the speed setting on fast, since I can't turn it up and down as I go. And then I've got all the other settings that I just went through. I found out what I liked, how fast I liked it, and so on and so forth. And so this ends up being the exact same patch that I used in the Organized series. Sounds like this. Now later on in this series, I'm going to discuss something that I have since found that I like even better than that. But that is my basic, here's the organ in combination with the steel. And if you play stuff that sounds like an organ player, that's got a lot of mileage built into it. Now, I've got a patch built here called Big Organ. And I'll say that this is a work in progress. I've added something to this, but so far I'm not necessarily sure it's going to work out for me. But this is the same thing as that previous one, except I've added some octave effects in with it, some pitch shifting effects. And so what you get as a result of this is you hear not only the initial note that you play, but also a tinge of an octave below that and a tinge of an octave above that. Now, octave effects can be tricky because they don't necessarily always track with your playing very well. And this particular one has a little bit of that going on. So whether that's perceptible to you or not, I can tell when I'm playing that there's a little bit of latency. So this one's still a work in progress. I've got something else that I use for the same idea later on. All right, next here I have a patch that I named Phase Steel. And so what is phase? Well, this effect over here in Mod 2 we have turned on. It says phaser. What does a phase shifter do? Well, what it does is it takes a signal that is in phase. That means it's wired correctly, not wired backwards. And it oscillates in and out of acting as though that signal were constantly being flipped-flopped between being in phase and out of phase. And it sounds like this. So it's just an oscillation sort of effect. And I don't necessarily use that a whole lot. However, there are some examples in steel guitar history where the phase shifter was sort of popular. Buddy Emmons used it a lot on some records.
See the equipment our pros use at the best prices anywhere online. Support small business and save.